This first main topic is going to be the IFFHS All-Decade Team. This organization is the International Football Historical Honors Society, I think. Let me double check what IFFHS stands for. Bear with me 1 second. The International Federation of Football for History, and my computer will just hurry up a little bit. And stats, I believe. My computer's being a little bit slow, so we'll just. Oh, wait, it's coming up. It's just a really long acronym. What it stands for doesn't matter. But anyways, they released their all-decade team just a couple days ago, and it was a really hot topic of debate in our Discord chat, and it was kind of fun to just talk about it, so I wanted to share it with you all on the podcast. So what this team is for the years 2011 to 2020, this organization took what they thought were the best 11 players and put them into this team for all to see. Who did the list include? Well, it had one goalkeeper, 4 defenders, 3 midfielders, and 3 forwards. These lists are always a little bit interesting because how they choose them is always ambiguous, but we'll talk about that in a second. But like I said, who's on it? Well, the goalkeeper was Hope Solo. The defenders were Lucy Bronze, Wendy Renard, Saki Kumagai, Nilla Fisher. For the midfielders, we had Jennifer Morotzen, Lina Gosling, and Carly Lloyd. And then for the forwards, we had Alex Morgan, Ada Hegerberg, and Marta of Brazil. So those were the players that they ended up choosing, which, really interesting list. I, by and large, don't have a ton of problems with it. It's really difficult because I haven't been following women's football for that entire decade. It's only been about a year or so that I've been really deeply following women's football, so I can't really speak to many of the players that are on the list. However, I will just give some thoughts, but take them with a grain of salt as I kind of just analyze this list a little bit. First, we'll start off going back to front. We'll start off with Hope Solo in the goalkeeper position. I have no issue with Hope Solo being the goalkeeper of the decade, especially for this team. She's the GOAT. By and large, there's no better goalkeeper in the history of women's football than Hope Solo, and I think that seems to be pretty unanimous amongst many experts and pundits in the field. I I can't. No other names really come to mind for the entire decade from 2010 to 2020, and also just in the history of women's football. Hope Solo is number one, and she seems to be widely regarded that way. So it seems like the obvious choice for this position. If you can think of a different goalkeeper that might have performed better this decade, feel free to put it down in the comments below. But I think the arguments would be pretty difficult to convince many otherwise that Hope Solo would be on this list. So jumping up into the defenders, let's start off with Lucy Bronze. Let's do the low hanging fruit with Lucy Bronze. Seems like a really clear choice for this particular list too. She has been winning Player of the Year awards from multiple organizations and multiple competitions across two of the best teams in the world of women's soccer, arguably Olympique Lyonnais and Manchester City being the main two. She's been on Team of the Year awards for last several years from all over the place, from UEFA, from the WSL, from FIFA. I mean, it seems like she is the clear-cut choice for the team of the decade, so I've really got no issue with that. She just won the FIFA Women's Player of the Year this year for 2020, so I mean, it's not really too. I can't think of a better player to put into this defender role than Lucy. And then moving on to Wendy Renard, who currently plays for Olympique Lyonnais and the French women's national team. No issue here from me. The main reason is she's been part of the FIFA Pro World 11, which is a pretty prestigious award for the last 5 years. Barring 2018, she wasn't in the list for 2018, but that means for, let's see, 2016, 2017, 2019, 2020, and I believe 2015, she was on the FIFA Pro World 11. When you are on that prestigious of a team for 5 years, that's half the decade, it kind of becomes a clear choice that, yeah, you were probably one of the better players of this decade, if not one of the best defenders of this decade. So I have no problem including Wendy Renard in this particular case. Moving on to Saki Kumagai and Nilla Fisher. I'm going to kind of group these two together because this is one of those cases where I don't really know a ton about each player. I know Saki Kumagai plays for Olympique Lyonnais, which in by itself adds to your resume because it's tough to play in that squad and play really well. I based my argument for a lot of these players based on awards they've won, just because stats isn't Stats are hard to come by, and they're always a little ambiguous depending on where you get them from. So my metric for a lot of these is awards, but Saki Kumagai and Nilla Fisher, they don't seem to really have a ton of awards that would back their case to be part of this all-decade team strongly. However, I'm sure there's a lot of you listening and watching this right now that could probably vouch for them a little bit deeper than I could. So, admittedly, there's not really a ton I could see as to why they should be in the list. But then again, I don't know of any players that might trump them in this list, so to speak. I can think of a couple players for the U.S. Women's National Team, like Becky Sauerbrunn, who's been playing very well for the U.S. all decade long. But however, like I said, without deeper knowledge about Saki Kumagai and Nilla Fisher, it kind of doesn't make my argument complete, if that makes sense. So if any of you guys know more about either of these two players and think that they should be in the list, feel free to jump down in the comments below and let me know your thoughts. Or if they shouldn't be in the list and other players have gotten snubbed for this list in the defender role, feel free to let me know that as well. So then with the defenders and goalkeeper out of the way, that brings us into the midfielders. So like I said earlier, Jennifer Morotzen, who plays for Germany currently, Lina Gosling, and Carly Lloyd. We'll start off with Jennifer. She plays for Germany. She has been widely regarded as one of the best midfielders in the world today. A lot of people would probably say top 5, and I would agree at this point. This is kind of the same case as Lucy Bronze, winning Player of the Year awards from multiple different organizations, UEFA, Germany, wherever pretty much she goes. I'm trying to think of a good way to frame this argument. There's so many players in this list, but by and large, she's been winning Player of the Year awards from multiple places. And when you've got diverse leagues and organizations giving you Player of the Year's award over the course of the last decade, that's a pretty good indicator. Like, a lot of people widely regard you as one of the better players, thus you belong in this list for the decade. So it's really not a huge surprise to me that Jennifer was in this list. And she's been in I'm trying to remember which World 11 she's been in. Actually, now that I'm thinking about it, she has been in the I'm even forgetting the acronym, the IFFHS World 11 team every year since 2017. So 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020, the last 4 years in a row, she has been in the same organization's World 11. So it's no surprise that if she made it for the yearly World 11 for about half the decade, that she would make the decade team as well. So I'm not really surprised that they picked her for this particular award, and I don't really have any qualms with it. I don't have any problems with it. She's a very good player and has been for a long time. Moving on to the other side of the midfield, Lina Gosling. This one is another mystery to me. I don't really know a ton about her. Looking at her pedigree and her awards, there's not really a ton there that I can definitively say, oh yeah, she certainly belongs in this list. I would contend there's probably better midfielders than Lina in this particular case, but like I said, without me knowing a lot more about her, I can't complete my argument. Like, I could say that just even dating back to 2015, if Lauren Holiday probably played through for the rest of the decade, she probably could have made a strong case for herself, but like I said, I'll just leave it at I don't really know a ton about Lina. So if any of you do and would like to support or maybe give some other midfielders that should be in her shoes, feel free to jump it down in the comments below. And of course, let me know. I like promoting dialogue like that. It makes this a lot more fun. And then thirdly, we've got Carly Lloyd. I really don't have a ton of problems with Carly Lloyd being in this list. She had probably the best performance ever in a big competition final, like in history, like across a lot of different major sports too. Providing a little bit of context around that, she had a hat trick in the 2015 World Cup final against Japan. It was a phenomenal performance. I think one that will be very hard to best. It will be bested someday, just by who and when, we have no idea. But she's gotten a ton of goals this decade. She has proved that she can be one of the most versatile players in the world. She has helped the U.S. go to glory pretty much all decade long. I don't really see a huge problem with her being in this list. I think Carly Lloyd is going to go down as one of the greatest players of all time in the world of WOSO. I think she has been more of an international star than she has been a club star. You could make that case for a lot of U.S. Women's National Team players. It seems like they more shine at the international stage than the club stage, but I think Carly Lloyd has shined so well internationally that she definitely deserves to be in this list. But if you guys have any other midfielders that maybe have gotten snubbed and should be in this list, feel free to jump down in the comments below and let me know your thoughts, of course. Moving on to the last group, which is going to be the forwards. Like I said earlier, we've got Alex Morgan, Ada Hegerberg, and Marta. We'll start off with Alex Morgan. So, over the course of the decade, Alex Morgan has scored 109 goals, and that's just for the U.S. Women's National Team alone. In that time, she was the CONCACAF Best Player. She won the FIFA Pro World 11 three times. When you're scoring that many goals and you're on that prestigious list three times throughout the course of the decade, it's really hard to say otherwise that she shouldn't be on this list. I couldn't, no other forwards really came to mind that have performed super, super well for the entire decade as well as Alex Morgan has. She scored some really big goals at the international stage and at the best, highest levels against the best teams. I don't have a problem with her being in this list. I can't think of any others where I'm like, oh yeah, they should definitely be in this particular list. Um, I will say, like, it seems like this list is sort of lacking wingers, but that's kind of one of the tough things that comes with all-decade teams like this, is one of the main metrics that you can really use to pick these players is the number of goals they score. Wingers' main job really isn't to score. Like, for example, over the course of the decade, Megan Rapinoe and Tobin Heath, just to name a few, they've scored like a third of the goals that Alex Morgan has, which isn't really an argument to say that they shouldn't be in this list, but when you're making these all-decade team lists, that's where it gets a little interesting, and it makes you wonder what the metric is or what the metrics are that these organizations pick these teams. But by and large, like I said, I have really no problem with Alex Morgan being included in this list. So I'll just kind of leave it at that. Moving on to Ada Hegerberg, she has scored over 200 goals this decade, which is absolutely astounding. Most of which have been with club because she has had a lot of problems with the international Norwegian side, which I don't blame her because they've just got a lot of stuff to work out, and I don't blame her for not wanting to play with them. But nevertheless, she scored over 200 goals in the decade. How do you argue against that? She scored FIFA Pro Awards. She scored big UEFA awards over the last 5 years. If she was left off this list, I would just question the credibility of the list entirely. So, I mean, to me, Ada Hegerberg was the no-brainer. She should definitely be in this list. When he scored that many goals in a decade, that's incredible. Even the course of a career, that's amazing. So for her to do it in one decade, that's awesome. And then last but not least, we have one of the GOATs of women's football, which is going to be Marta dos Santos of Brazil. Like I said, she's one of the GOATs. I would say that she's approaching the twilight of her career now. She had a really good decade from 2000 to 2010, and then now I would say she's had a good enough decade in 2010 through 2020 that she should also be in this list. She carried Brazil in the 2012 London Olympics, if I'm thinking of the right matchup. She almost won it for them against the U.S., but then one of the greatest moments in U.S. soccer history happened when Abby Wambach scored that header. So, I mean, if that doesn't happen, then Marta, that just strengthens her argument even more. But her performance in that match cannot be overstated. It was incredible. She has won two-time FIFA Player of the Year awards in this decade, which that in itself is a huge accomplishment, and she's won it like 4 other times in the previous decade. So she's consistently been one of the world's best players for a long time, including this decade, and she's also been named to the FIFA Pro World 11 three times. So just with those awards alone, and plus she's scored over 150 goals this decade to top it off too. So even just by goal scoring alone, it's like this would be another case where if Marta was left off this list, even as a midfielder, I'd be fine with her being a midfielder. It would kind of damage the credibility in this list for me personally. I mean, at the end of the day, it's just a list, but still, big prestigious award. It's really cool to see all these players who have shined over the last decade and what these organizations think and how they measure these different players. So, guys, that's the IFFHS All-Decade Team for 2011 through 2020. What did you think of the list? Feel free to jump down in the comments below and let me know your thoughts. Maybe who got snubbed, maybe who shouldn't be on this list. Feel free to just let me know down in the comments below. So,